And we're live. Welcome, everybody, here to the Lakers Lounge podcast. I'm Anthony Irwin, Lakers insider for LakersDaily.com, joined by, you know what? He's here right now. What have you done for me lately? My favorite beat reporter, Dan Woike of the LA Times. How you doing, bud?
I'm good. I'm enjoying my second 30-plus point margin that I've seen today on my television. So this isn't the first. But
This
no,
is
this is a whooping.
It's crazy. I thought that, and it's funny. This is how it always goes. A team wins a playoff game and everybody thinks, oh, they just figured it out. They'll never lose ever again. The Minnesota Timberwolves were like, actually, watch this.
Yeah, I know. Well, look, I think Dallas has been the better team in this series. By the way, like very well coached, like Jason Kidd and that staff,
Yeah.
Like they've had a really good series, a really good playoff. I don't love like how much this is gonna. Let's start off with like old man corner. I don't love how much variance 3-point shooting has put into the playoffs and into the NBA. Like I almost sort of wish you could play the playoffs with no 3-pointers.
Yeah.
Like it would be like I think a much more fun exercise. Obviously, it's part of the game right now, but like there is like like Luka just gets like insanely hot, and he's great.
And it's over, and your season is over.
But it's done. And look, we've seen teams come back from 16 and stuff like that. But part of the reason is because of the high variance of 3-point shooting. It is sort of, and we can talk about this. It's sort of maybe one of the fatal flaws with the Lakers' current roster build is that they've got $100 million tied up in players who don't shoot a ton of threes. I guess LeBron's volume numbers are up, but actually they were down this year.
When AD stopped being able to shoot, it legitimately altered the franchise's course. Like it changed everything.
6 a game. He's gonna shoot 6 a game, Anthony.
Yeah, it didn't quite work out that way. No, my wacky wild idea, because I'm a baseball guy too, is that teams should be able to alter where they put the 3-point line depending on how their roster is built. So you get like more home court advantage. So like a team like the Warriors with like Steph, who can hit from 40 feet out there or whatever, and Clay can do the same thing, they would put it out further away, right? And then teams like the Lakers, who want the game to be played in the mud, they would probably move that thing way in there. So
I want no corner threes. That's what I want. I want the arc to stretch. Anyway. I want the arc to stretch to the sidelines. That's my sort of middle ground. I also would prefer some level of like slow pitch tournament softball thing where you only get like 2 per quarter. And then and then it's just an automatic out. If you make that third one, you're behind the line, you lose the points maybe.
Or it's just a 2, right? Like you like because in I think in slow pitch, I think some leagues they'll do it where it's an out, or some leagues will do it where it's only a single,
long single. Yeah. I played in a tournament once where it was an out, and I hit one over the fence for an out, and it was like one of the worst feelings of my life because I got to bat flip, and then you bat flipped your way right back to the dugout. But anyways, we're not here to talk about weird rules, right? I mean, we can, but
I mean, it's just whatever comes up, comes up.
I'm just 34 points. 34 points, Anthony. Have you ever seen someone go down by 34? Ever? Has that ever happened in the history of news on this date? Has anybody ever been down 34?
No,
early
never ever happened. No. So, I see what you're saying. Yeah, no,
how about that?
That is perfect. I'm
it should be. I'm kind of rooting for that.
Yeah, that would be perfect. If they were to win by 34, that would be pretty perfect. Today on the show, we're going to be talking about the reporting going into the Lakers head coaching search, what's been going on there, the latest, if there's any new information there. We have been hearing more about the assistant coaches that are being considered there, what that means also for the head coach situation. And then like as much attention has been paid to the head coach, and that's obviously the biggest and most important thing that they have to do next, the roster is significantly more important, and they have a lot of big decisions that they're going to be making here in the offseason. So we're going to be discussing that as well on the back end of the show. A quick reminder, please do hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you guys are watching live right now on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button just like right below the show. It's right there. Tell your friends that you love the show. Tell your enemies that you hate it. And we'll go ahead and jump into this. So I'll start here. This has been funny. The way that this has played out for me is everything to this point has been very clearly moving in the direction of JJ Redick is the guy. JJ Redick is going to be the guy. Like that's where this is heading. In your piece, which is linked in the comments, up at the top of the comments, for the LA Times, please do subscribe to that and Dan's newsletter, which is also fantastic. I like both of them.
Free. Newsletter's free, but
yeah. I like the newsletter because it's really your voice. It's, it's a little more laid back. You talk about music in there too, but in your latest piece, the Lakers or somebody, your source with the Lakers said, or internally, they look at all of the linkage to JJ Redick as just, quote, noise. That is their term that they use there. My thing with that is if you bang pots and pans, it makes noise.
Yeah.
So what do you do there with not just like that term and that terminology and how they're looking at JJ Redick here, potentially according to your piece, but also the fact that you have Chris Haynes saying that he would be shocked if it was anybody other than JJ Redick. I said the other day that the hiring felt imminent. I got some more stuff behind the scenes that would indicate that it is not imminent for a couple of reasons. One being ESPN, but then you also get Adrian Wojnarowski and you saying that this is a process that's going to take weeks. Obviously, we don't all talk to the same people, but normally we don't see that broad a spectrum.
Yeah.
What do you think is going on there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tricky without like revealing like a ton of who I've been talking to on this. But like, I think the easiest way so when I was in Chicago for the combine, I basically asked everybody two versions of two different questions, maybe three. I would ask people, what do you think of Bronny James? This was like really why I was functionally there. 2, who are the Lakers going to hire? 3, what are they going to do with the roster? Some version of those questions, or those questions will get asked back to me from executives and people from different organizations and stuff like that. The coaching question almost unanimously landed on JJ Redick. That was just sort of, and this is weeks ago, right? Yeah. Like where it was like, it felt like it's going to be JJ Redick. It's going to be JJ Redick. It's going to be JJ Redick. And I mean, editorializing, I still think it's going to be JJ Redick. But there are elements of the process that haven't happened yet. Things that need to occur. People who need to sign off on decisions and all of that stuff that it just quite frankly hasn't happened yet. And I think there are people inside the building who are trying to be as true to a process, at least give it as much merit as it can possibly give, something that it seems like we all know the destination, right? But I do think they want to be honest, at least in terms of arriving at it. It's been a weird coaching search. There has not been a lot of
Which
noise.
Which is really saying something given the last few coaching searches.
It's just like there hasn't been like a ton of noise, like outside of like the Laker building. You know what I mean? It's been pretty tight. Rob Pelinka has played it pretty tight on this one, which is interesting, I think, for a lot of reasons. Ultimately it's his decision and Jeannie Buss's decision, right? And, when you talk to some people inside the building, they'd say like, how can we have a front runner? We haven't done like full on in-person interviews yet.
Yeah.
Like that would be dishonest to the process. So there's elements of that at play. One of the things though, that like universally comes up, right, is like, and you'd push back when you talk to people about this, is you'd say like, if you think you want to be honest in the process, I think there's very little doubt how well JJ Redick is going to present.
Yeah.
I think like anybody who knows, I mean, he's a professional broadcaster.
Yes.
Like he is going to be able to.
He has this opportunities because his ability to talk about basketball.
Yeah, because his ability to communicate and present. Right. So I think I wrote that out of Chicago at one point. It was like, that is one of the overwhelming reasons, is it sort of feels like it's like if you convince yourself that you can invite the most gregarious person you know to a party, you're also probably pretty comfortable with that person kind of taking command of the party. Like that's just part of the deal. And I think if you have, in this case, if the Lakers have decided that JJ Redick's lack of experience isn't a big enough factor, right? And I think to this stage, like I think they have decided that it is not a big enough factor to disqualify him. And if you focus on the other elements, he's going to do pretty well. I covered JJ with the Clippers. Like I think I have a pretty good sense as to like what kind of basketball approach he takes. And it's a lot of qualities you would want out of a head coach. He's smart. He's analytical. He's thoughtful. He doesn't waste time. He's efficient. He's one of the first people I've ever heard. I remember we were talking about, I forget the dude. Malcolm Gladwell. We were talking about Malcolm Gladwell once and about like 10,000 hours and different stuff like that. And he pushed back pretty hard on that. Is saying like, 10,000 hours of shooting at like, driveway pace does me nothing. Like I'm not a shoot 1,000 shots a day guy. I'm shoot 100 at, full speed. And I think that's the type of approach you would want to take with like a veteran team, right? Is you'd want to be efficient. You want to be smart with your time. You'd want to work smarter, not harder, all of these different types of things. He's very demanding. He's very, very demanding of himself and I think of others. And if he does this, which by all accounts, I mean, he wants to do it, he's going to pour everything into it. He's a perfectionist. Yeah. Like I don't think it's a coincidence that when he like kind of entered this podcast space, like he has done it more aggressively and he's done it in a quite frankly, a more effective way than a lot of other people who have. And, he was really smart about going to video and different things he's a thoughtful person. Yeah. And so I think all of that is super true. I think though, like it's head coaching in the NBA, I think he's like sort of like the Iron Throne though too. Like you don't really know until someone sits in it how they're going to act and like what's going to work and what's not going to work. It is, in my opinion, I think it is the single hardest thing a front office can do is hire the right head coach.
It's the thing the NBA is the worst at. You just don't know. I was curious. Somebody asked a good question here. Kurt Affair is asking, do essentially the executives that you were talking to in Chicago, do they think JJ is capable of doing a good job as a head coach? So when you were talking to people in Chicago and you were asking who do you think is going to be the head coach and it was coming back as JJ Redick, did you ask those executives how they feel JJ would fare in that position?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. One, I think there's two kind of answers to this. There's how would JJ Redick be as a head coach, and how would JJ Redick be as the Lakers head coach? And I think people view those as different answers, right? Yeah. And I think you look at JJ Redick and you say like he has a lot of the things you would want in a future coach. I think universally everybody would prefer that he had assistant coaching experience under his belt. That is like a universal belief, right? That it is harder to do when you haven't done it, right? There's just things that happen that you've got to deal with that you can't prepare for, and that it helps if you've been in the trenches in some way before. And then I think, though, the other part of this is like it's a really, really hard job. The Lakers job is a very difficult job. It's a difficult job for a lot of reasons. They are.
Especially
I don't want to say
now.
I was gonna say like, well, in a vacuum, it's a very hard job. But like this moment today, you have what I believe to be the most win now player of all time in LeBron James.
Yep.
Right. Like there's never been a player in the history of the sport more win now than LeBron James entering season 22, about to turn 40 years old and still being all NBA good. It's just like so you're kind of like entering like almost a 2 timeline sort of phase in this organization. And they've kind of tried to operate that way the last few years. Like they've done it, that being said, like one of the criticisms I hear from rival executives is that the Lakers haven't pushed all in. Really?
Yeah.
Post Westbrook, that's a thing.
I've levied that criticism now for a while. Like you could even look at the year that they went quote unquote all in for Russell Westbrook. They still weren't willing to go all in because they didn't want to bring back Caruso with the luxury taxes that they were reluctant to spend back then. Right now is the most all in I think you can argue that they've ever been.
Yeah, like since then, like they've actually been like fairly prudent with their decision making, and they haven't, They haven't like really put their foot to the gas on trades and made, a Buddy Hield Miles Turner deal that would have depleted their assets. Whether or not Atlanta would have considered some version of a full on Austin Reeves plus all our picks trade for DeJounte Murray. The Lakers weren't interested in doing that, so I think that to me, it is sort of an interesting, it's a challenge for whoever has that job. Is you're going to be tasked with development. You're going to be tasked with staying competitive, certainly. But like you also have to maximize whatever's left of LeBron and deal with the unavoidable issues that come with having a player at that stage in his career at that money. I think it's the most interesting thing about the Lakers in general right now is sort of team building around an all NBA 40-year-old.
Yeah.
It's just like, I don't know what you're supposed to do.
Every new step is a step further into uncharted territory. Like every step that they take is just, like every day that you wake up and he is still playing at this level is another day further off the face of the planet, according to Kyrie. The part of this that actually I kind of wondered about this the other day to Raj, and it's something I haven't been able to get off my head. I don't know that the Lakers are necessarily equipped to draft and develop their own next superstar, right? Like their own next Kobe. If they were to, like, after LeBron, if they were to tank, have the number one pick, take that number one pick and develop that player into their future superstar or whatever, I don't think that they, like, we found out that they aren't necessarily equipped to do that because that's what they were trying to do before LeBron showed up. I wonder if we can say the same thing about the rookie head coach. And if the Lakers, like, as much attention is getting paid towards, is JJ Redick ready for the Lakers? Are the Lakers equipped to develop a rookie head coach in this kind of a situation where it's going to be high leverage? The Lakers, according to The Athletic, are comparing him right now, reportedly, to Pat Riley. And if you think that highly about the guy, and that was another thing that I've been laughing about throughout this whole process, is like, once you compare him or you're willing to leak that you're comparing him to Pat Riley, you kind of have to hire the Pat Riley guy. Like, I just feel like that's the way that this has to go.
Is that fashion based too? I think that part of that's fashion based. Part of that comparison.
It for sure is. It for sure. He looks great in a suit. Like, he's a very well put together guy.
Quarter zips. That's a coaches association rule. He's gonna have to fight that. It's gonna be crazy. He's gonna hate it. He's gonna hate it.
Although I think I saw that somebody. There was a report out there that the league is considering bringing back, or at least allowing, coaches to wear the suit if they want to wear a suit.
I love it.
I miss it. My
European soccer coach is the best version of it, where you can wear a suit, you can wear a real sharp, like merino wool sweater. You can do a lot of different stuff with pea coats. I really think like that. This to me would be part of why Redick would do this. He's not gonna wear, like, I don't know, like bird dog pants and like probably built, or he'll get like a built deal, Viore maybe, and wear like those quarter zips. Like he's gonna hate it.
No,
he's the reason I learned the words bespoke, by the way, covering him. That's like, that was the Redick experience. Anyways,
I miss the coaches that were like just in the league that didn't ever really learn how to tie a tie. And you could tell that they were getting some help there at the end of the bench. Because that was something that, I worked, I think the longest job that I had growing up as a kid was working at Men's Warehouse. So I knew how to tie a tie really quickly. And I would look down there at the end of the bench. It's like, somebody help this guy. Come on. Like, just, it's not that hard.
It just taught, to me, it like taught you, there was a lot you could like glean from like how people like present themselves. One of the craziest things I've ever seen a head coach do, and I've thought about it a lot over these last two playoff runs for the Lakers, because they've involved the same guy with Michael Malone. I covered, when I was doing national NBA stuff, I covered the Game 7 that Nikola Jokic won against San Antonio, the first round of the playoffs. Really kind of a coming out. I want to say like 2019 postseason maybe. Like really like kind of the first like big Jokic. He had a triple-double in a Game 7 and stuff like that. Everybody very excited you win a Game 7, especially for an organization that hadn't been winning. Post-game, Michael Malone came in to do his post-game. He no longer had his suit coat on, and he no longer had his tie He did have his white shirt, though, still buttoned all the way up to the top.
All the way to the
which
top?
I thought is a psycho move. That is insane. Like, you loosened up by just
comfortable part of wearing the suit.
100%.
Is that top button?
And that's how. And by the way, that's how intense he was. I saw that and I was like, that dude is crazy. He is an intense guy. Turns out I was right.
You totally were. But yeah, what do you think about the Lakers' ability to develop a coach here? Because even if it isn't Redick, Borrego only has one stop previously. Sam Cassell has never been a head coach before. Those are the reported, three kind of top candidates as it stands right now. You could talk about Mike Honora. You could talk about David Adelman. There isn't a candidate out there unless Mike, the negotiations between Mike Brown and the Sacramento Kings continue to go so disastrously. There isn't a candidate out there who has a ton of experience. Are the Lakers capable of can they learn from their experience with Darvin Ham here and Luke Walton for that matter?
I mean, I think, in both of those cases, right, like there was a good deal of goalpost moving that happened within those tenures, right? When the Lakers hired Darvin Ham, it wasn't to win a conference finals series in year one. Like they may tell you they saw that pathway. They're lying. That's not, they didn't see that.
He started the season with Russell Westbrook on the roster. You were not going to win with that guy on there.
That was that was a developmental. They thought they were going to be entering a much more developmental stage than they're in right now. I think they are in some ways trying to thread a needle right now with both. It's interesting because like Redick somehow feels like he kind of accomplishes two things and like an idea. Like he accomplishes sort of the notion of like, we're building for the future, right? Like this is a guy that we see great potential in. It's a lot of it is very projectable as to like his demeanor, his knowledge, what he's about, like he'll learn. But at the same time, it also feels like they're counting on him like being like this like crazy sort of natural at it too.
Yeah.
Where you kind of have to be both. I mean, look, like Pat Riley,
no pressure.
But I mean, even some of the other, like when you hear about like some of the other people, like it is the pathway to this. There's not a great track record of guys who have gone straight into head coaching without like a lot of other stops. Like, I mean, there have been guys who've had some success along the way. I mean, like, I don't believe Doc Rivers was an assistant coach before Orlando hired him. I don't think. Vinny Del Negro
too.
Yeah, Vinny Del Negro is a guy who was broadcasting, who went then and finished 500 every year. Like there are guys that have done. Jason Kidd is a player who is developed as a head coach. But I mean, look, Jason Kidd's worked at three teams in head jobs. Won a championship as a lead assistant at a fourth stop. That's not going to be the pacing that the Lakers want with this. But I also think that they have looked at sort of the marketplace, and they've been kind of like, this is the home run swing, which is a fair criticism, by the way. I think they've taken home run swings, generally speaking, instead of maybe, would they be in a better position? Because they felt, by the way, like they felt a lot of these ways about Darvin Ham. And if you talk to people around the league, the way I talked to people around the league about Darvin Ham before he got hired, he was really hard to profile. It was like profiling like Jesus in some ways, like how universally loved he was, how much people like praised his consistency, praised his level-headedness, praised his ability to relate to people, the way he communicates, all these different things. Like, I mean, the Lakers thought they were getting a star coach in the making. That's really what they believed. And I think a lot of other people believe that too. And it is, to your point.
Then he went to a Western Conference Finals his first year. Like, I was really excited for second year Darvin Ham. I was like, I thought
he had a really good playoff run too. And I think he worked really well with his players. He worked really well with his assistant coaches and game planning. I mean, it wasn't like he got the floor wiped with him, by Taylor Jenkins. It didn't happen.
Yeah.
I mean, they were a step ahead of Memphis strategically, who obviously the Grizzlies were missing pieces. Mm-hmm. But they were a step ahead of Steve Kerr. Yeah. In that series too. They were always on the adjustment tilt in that series, which, credit to them. But I think, Darvin's undoing and stuff like that is, I mean, I'm sure you've covered it ad nauseum. But I think it does again speak to the it does sort of speak to the challenges. You're right. But I would say though, again, rookie head coach, James Borrego, Terry Stott, like you pick it. Like so much of this is like situation and timing. A good coach today can be a bad coach tomorrow. A bad coach yesterday can be a good coach tomorrow. There are very few guys who just like transcend space and time on this job.
Yeah.
It's really a very, very short list.
It really is. I mean, in especially given the hopes and expectations that the Lakers have for whoever it is that they hire. Like the idea that like, hey, we need you to operate on LeBron's timeline, which is yesterday. We need you to optimize Anthony Davis, which is difficult because he isn't a primary ball handler. We need you to also ideally be good enough at this to like outlast the LeBron James era and be ready for a potential rebuild on the other side of it. Like what everything that they're asking of whoever they hire sounds like Jesus. You know, it sounds like a really complicated task that they're asking for. Whoever they bring out.
He wants 5 years and an option though, so he's too expensive. I don't think like you're going to be able to get it in. 18 mil per. He wants pop money.
I think you get a certain bonus if you're literally able to walk on water. I think that there's a certain clause in the coaches union negotiations. But yeah, a big part of this too. You kind of alluded to Terry Stotts. You mentioned Rajon Rondo in your piece. That was the first time I'd seen Rajon Rondo linked to these kinds of conversations. So kudos to you on that one. And then obviously Sam Cassell has been mentioned as a potential assistant coach candidate. It was funny. Last weekend, I was at a party with a bunch of other writers, and it just happened to be at a party with a bunch of other NBA writers. And I was kind of saying, like, just wait, the Jared Dudley stuff is going to start happening. The Jared Dudley stuff is going to start. So he has been linked now to the Lakers as well. These names that are being thrown out there are kind of exciting in a vacuum when you just see them by themselves. But when you kind of stack them up together, if Terry Stotts and Borrego aren't on this staff, that's
Scott Brooks too. And Scott Brooks too. Sorry, Anthony.
Okay.
Another name. Terry Stotts, I think, is a guy that I haven't actually heard his name much this way through. I think I expected to hear it more, to be totally honest, because the Lakers have tried to hire him as an assistant coach multiple times.
Yeah.
And like
they seem to like his X's and O's, but
they do. Yeah. And look, and I do think like to a certain degree, they tried this, like with Darvin Ham. There was a head coach they've tried to hire. I mean, they tried to hire Terry Stotts at one point. They tried to hire Steve Clifford. I don't know if that's been reported or not, but like they were interested.
Oh yeah.
And they weren't able to get that done. He ended up obviously being the head coach in Charlotte. But they have, I think that's like one of the things I've noticed with the Lakers as I've covered them is like they default to what's worked ultimately right in the past. And I think in my reporting, like this assistant coach kind of building out that's happening, it does feel a little bit like the 2019 coach search, where a lot of the staff was kind of given to whoever was going to be the head coach.
Yeah.
And
that was one of Lou's problems with like those negotiations. Yeah.
And I think that's going to be there are elements to that in this case. I think there are very much like these are the types of people, if not flat out, these are the people we want, around. We want an experienced head coach. So whether that's Scott Brooks or James Borrego or both, we want a player-centric front row assistant who can work our locker room, whether that's Jared Dudley, whether that's Sam Cassell, Rajon Rondo could do that certainly. Like that kind of like a tie. And Sam certainly, while not a former head coach, like does have sort of that experience as an assistant, that he's like a credible lead assistant in some ways. But I really believe they want a former head coach. On that staff.
I think ideally a couple.
Yeah, and I think they were moving in that direction even last summer. Certainly prior to the Western Conference Finals run, which just earned everybody the right to kind of move forwards the way it was. Yeah, so I think that seems to be what I'm picking up when I've spoken to people. And look, these names are coming from the coaching community. They're coming from, sources within the organization. I saw one of the things that got a ton of run was like, and I don't mean to, I can curse a little bit, right?
Yeah.
A little. I'm not shitting on anybody's reporting. Like when Chris Haynes said that, like JJ Redick is calling around trying to figure out a staff. People like really grabbed a hold of that as proof that, he's got like that is part of when you are at this stage of interviews, like that is a question that the Lakers will want to know. Who is on your staff? Like that is a big time question for people. That is not a we hire you and then let's figure that out in a month. Right. So I think like I didn't view that as like a smoking gun of anything really. I mean, that's pretty status quo for somebody at this stage in an interview, would be to have, a pretty good idea of who's going to be on your staff. And to do that, you call around.
The timing of it was a little weird because like I had first heard of JJ talking to people about like, coaching staff decisions and stuff like that, like a week and a half ago. And
I'm sure it's even longer. I can tell you, I've heard it longer than that.
Yeah.
But I think that's like, if you want to get into this, like you have to kind of know, you kind of have to know who the type of people you want to work with. Like, it's one of those things too. Like, I think, especially when you go into something for like the first time, like knowing JJ a little bit and kind of knowing how he prepares for stuff. I mean, again, you can look at the people he surrounded himself with that, like, oh man, three. It's like, this isn't Tommy Alter's first job. And you know what I mean? And sports broadcasting or any of that stuff. Like you call around, you say, who do I need? Like, what kind of people do I need? Who can augment what I do? And I think JJ's been in that process because, I mean, a lot of this is like more, I would even say more assumption than reporting. It's just like, he's not a step skipper. That's just not who he is.
Yeah.
Like he is like an obsessive worker and an obsessive preparer. And so that didn't surprise me at all. And I mean, I would flat out assume that Borrego's had the same conversations. I'd be stunned if he did.
I'm glad that you mentioned Borrego. What do we do with this? Because again, Redick has seemed like the guy here for a little bit. You reported that that Borrego impressed people in his conversations with the
Lakers. Did really well.
What like those feel like not mutually exclusive per se, but like it is kind of tough for Redick to be seen as a guy, and then for Borrego to impress as a in a conversation about a potential head coach gig.
Yeah.
Or did I take that the wrong way? Was that more than he impressed generally speaking?
No, I mean, I think both. I think he had a really strong interview. I mean, he's, if you know a little bit about James, like he's like a really like well-rounded, like interesting person. I mean, this is somebody who has like an English and a leadership, like he has an English degree and a leadership, like a master's in leadership studies. Like he's like a bright dude. Yeah. He's like a really bright guy. Who, I spoke to some sources, with New Orleans kind of about like what his sort of role was on that team. And, you hear the word organizer a lot, right? That like one of his biggest strengths is his organization. So you can really easy kind of piece these pieces together and say like, this is a guy who's also going to like present really well. He's really bright. He has a lot of respect. He can kind of walk into these rooms with people, whether it be for an hour of intense grilling or 20 minutes of handshake. Like, this is what I'm about. What are you about? And I think that's kind of been the nature of where they're at in these in-person interviews. And he can do really well. I think the other thing we can look to from the Lakers past is these interviews aren't always just for head coaches, even though they are for head coaches. You know what I mean? And I think if they land on JJ Redick, and I reported this, like they would want James Borrego. I think like, they would love to have him. They'd love to have James Borrego and Sam Cassell. I think, there is money potentially because they're not in the Mike Brown, Greg Popovich, Steve Kerr, Ty Lue, Monty Williams type of price range. Like there is there's money to spend to some degree on assistant coaching. I think they've recognized that that's an area that they can beef up a little bit of their payroll, and especially knowing who the types of coaches they've spoken to, they're going to have to just to like kind of give it all more gravitas.
I've seen you shoot. Do you think you'll be on the staff as their shooting coach? Will the Lakers finally have a shooting coach?
I'll tell you this, they could afford me. I based on some of these numbers, yes, a very respectful counteroffer from the Lakers on this. I don't know. I haven't heard much about like a specific shooting coach
Yeah. No,
along this
I'm
way.
more asking in
Yeah.
jest. But yeah.
Yeah. No, but like I mean, I do think though, like you build, like that's the way you sort of build the staff, right? Is you kind of look at like roles. And I think there is a risk, and I think this is true for roster building, and I think the Lakers have suffered at times with this too, where you just hire everybody too.
Yeah.
I think you look at Phoenix, like when I've talked to people somewhat a little bit about Phoenix's bench last year, it was crowded. It had a lot of coaches, a lot of really smart coaches on that staff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's a lot of voices and a lot of opinions. And so you do kind of want to like get the right type of hierarchy. You want to make sure that you've got people operating at different stations. You want people ascending. I mean, like we can talk about Dallas for a second. Like Dallas's bench, I think, is a really good example of like people at different stations in their career. You have a guy, you have Jason Kidd as the head coach. Sean Sweeney is a guy that people he's had some head coaching interviews before. Really highly regarded tactician. Alex Jensen comes over from Utah, another guy who's been kind of like on the fringes of some coaching searches. You have a guy in Jared Dudley who's rising, and is trying to like, in addition to knowing basketball, is somebody who really understands people. And it's a good balance and it works together. It's not four guys that all think that they should be the number two guy, despite them all having ambitions.
Yeah, that's the tricky thing with the assistant coach hiring practice, right? Is that all of them, and I think we ran into some of this with the staff last year, where I got the sense occasionally that when Ham was kind of floundering or drowning a little bit, some people were holding on to the life rope, the life preserver, like, I could climb up, and that's where it gets kind of tough, yeah, I'm really curious what that looks like. Let's talk about the roster though, because as much talk as there is about the head coach, at the end of the day, if the Lakers, they clearly need more two-way help. How they go about getting it, what that looks like, all of that is certainly interesting. We'll start super macro coming off of the season. Based on the stuff that you kind of hear about what the Lakers were thinking and who might potentially be available, I would have bet that the Lakers were going to go all in for a third star coming like right after the season ended. And then over the course of the offseason, I feel like more momentum has actually come behind the path of, well, let's just retool. Let's see if we can upgrade the wing spot with a two-way guy. Let's see what we can get for a better backup big who can also play alongside AD. Let's kind of distribute those resources across the roster more so than go out and get a third star to this point. If you had to choose which path feels more likely to you, which do you think that would be?
I think it's the latter. I think if there was a third star out there that thought credibly was worth everything, I think they would pursue it.
Yeah. Mitchell comes to mind.
Mitchell was the one, and like I'm not totally sold that they think it's credible that it would be worth everything.
Yeah.
That, that 29 unprotected, 31 unprotected, because those picks have to be unprotected. And I think that is like an important sort of nuance in this, that if you're trading 29 and 31, you can't protect either of them. You can't protect 31 because you can't trade 32 picks. So you could convey it to seconds, but then that loses some of its juice, certainly, right? As a future first. If it's like top 3 protected, and then if it's the first pick in the draft and you end up with a second round pick in that year, like I don't think teams really want to do that. And then obviously if you trade 29, now you can't roll over to 30 because then you can't trade 31.
Right.
For some Stepien geekery. But like, so those picks are unprotected. They have a lot of value. When you talk to people around the league, like despite the fact that there is always sort of the belief that it's the Lakers and it'll
find somebody.
It'll be someone else at some other point. It's forcing their way there. There is that belief. So my first blush was sort of like if they thought that was a guy, like, okay, here's like, I mean, Jason Tatum. They would push all in for Jason Tatum, right? Like he's good enough. Like they would do it. I think they would do it. I think they would have a real serious Donovan Mitchell conversation. They've had probably really serious Donovan Mitchell conversations.
For sure.
I also think that they believe they would get outbid. And also, it doesn't really sound like he's that available. You know, the Hawks guys, I don't think there's an all-in trade there.
Yeah.
You know, in their eyes. Who else? Brandon Ingram, not an all-in guy for them. You know,
That would be hilarious.
You know, there just isn't. They're really Zach LaVine's not an all-in guy for them. I mean, I think I reported last year that there are people around the league that thought if you were going to trade for Zach LaVine, you should be getting something back with him to like help.
For sure.
So
he thought he was going to Detroit, and then he got surgery to make sure he didn't go to Detroit.
Yeah. You know, I mean, who are some of the other guys that could be like all-star level players moving? I mean, Julius Randle's not an all-in guy. This is just like the parade of former Lakers. You know,
Mikal Bridges.
Mikal Bridges, I don't think is an all-in guy. I just don't think I like
the Nets do.
Yeah. Well, the Nets are, you know, and so I think that drives a lot of the thinking on this, honestly. Whether it's the better thing to do or not. I mean, I see some people mention
Chad is asking about Lauri Markkanen. Yeah.
If you're going to trade your 2 future first round picks and Austin Reeves, which presumably would be some version of the cost for Lauri Markkanen, I think you need to be pretty sure that you're going to be conference finals or better. And that's just, it becomes, again, to go back, it's such a hard bet with LeBron. It's just and Anthony Davis. It's such a hard bet. Like on one hand, you need to be like thinking today, but you should also always be terrified of tomorrow. And it is like a really strange organizational place that they're in. So yeah, I think ultimately, look, a much more realistic option, and I think they'll be aggressive with their picks. I think they'll look to trade 17 if the right deal is there. Like they were shopping their pick last year up until draft night, trying to move back, maybe figure out a way, especially in a draft like this. Like they may like a player at 25 as much as they do at 17.
Yeah.
And if you can move back and pick up, you know, a role player, like I think the name last year was like Royce O'Neal or something like that, right? Like if you can move back 7 or 8 spots and you grab a useful player, that'd be great. I think would be for them. They'd like something like that. There is there's another challenge too, Anthony, with the roster, which is that like there's no room on it. Like if if we look at this roster and we look at it going into next season as currently constructed, right? Like you already have Christian Wood, opting in. I think, when I speak to people, I think the expectation is that Cam Reddish will opt in.
Yeah.
Jackson Hayes probably opts out, but maybe not. I think D'Lo's situation is unsettled. Despite reports to the contrary.
That's a fascinating one. Like that is, I was talking to people last week or whatever, and over the week since, and the you talk about a broad spectrum, a wide spectrum of like thoughts on a player.
It's crazy.
There are people who like aren't positive he's going to opt in or opt out. There are people who aren't sure what his market would even be if he did. You get a lot of the Orlando Magic noise there, but I kind of feel like that's a lot of agents using the Magic because we already saw Malik Monk tied to them too.
Sure.
I saw that like
Klay Thompson. I mean, they're the list of guards that they're going to chase.
Yeah. Can you shoot? The Magic are interested in you, and so like, I don't, the D'Lo thing. I think the Lakers are probably hoping that he opts in because that gives them a trade chip this year. But yeah, I legitimately have no idea how that's going to play out.
He's in that interesting phase for them too, where he's like both because of bird rights and different things like that. Like where he's both like if he opted in, they would love to upgrade. I think to a more two-way player. If you're going to move forwards with him and Austin Reeves, I think kind of it's gonna stunt both of them in their own ways. You're taking one of them off the ball. You're going to ask them to have to do more defensively, maybe than they're comfortable with or capable of. So that's not ideal. You're also, by the way, like really cluttered in your backcourt with just like bodies that you want to get on the floor.
Yep.
They're the overwhelming favorites to re-sign Max Christie. Like that seems like it's going to happen, but if you're going to re-sign Max Christie, he's got to be on the court.
Yeah.
Like this time for him to play. right? If you're gonna, I mean, look, I'm of the belief that they should do what they can to try to get Jalen Hood-Schifino minutes, and like decide whether he's good or not.
If he's
like
on
if
the
you're
roster,
gonna, if he's on the roster, you need to create a pathway for him to play.
Yeah, that likely
this is
means
one of
moving Vincent too, but yeah.
Well, or depending on what happens with D'Angelo Russell too, right? Yeah. Like, so it is sort of an interesting. There's like a little bit of a crunch already, so that does give some merit to potentially bundling a couple of guys in a deal. You know what I mean? It'd be nice if the Lakers were sitting on like just a fat stack of second rounders where you could offload some of these players that had player options that are opting in if you want to move on from them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just to like kind of like create the roster space to go out and upgrade in free agency. But like, here's the other part of this, Anthony. This is a bad free agency class.
Yeah,
it's not a good free. It's not a great free agency class. I've got a list. I'm going to write this at some point.
Yeah, I saw a list of potential MLE targets today, and I was like, I don't want any of these guys.
Yeah,
I think it's likely they use their MLE on Taurean Prince. I think they wind up keeping.
I think there's a chance. I mean, but like even if you still do that, like I mean, that is again now you are, depending on whether or not you think he's a 3 or a 4. That is like another place where your roster is cluttered.
Yeah.
Like you just have a lot of those types of guys. You know what I mean? You're going to be splitting minutes between, Rui Hachimura, Jared Vanderbilt, LeBron James, and Max Christie some in that 3 area. Like those are 4 guys. And we haven't even discussed, like, God forbid they draft someone like, Peyton DeSilva or somebody like that. You know what I mean? Who is like seemingly like the kind of plug and play Hawkes style name du jour that I've heard a lot about and stuff like that. Like not just with the Lakers. Peyton, did I say Peyton DeSilva? I meant Tristan DeSilva. I'm sorry. The Colorado guy. What's his name? Tristan, right?
I think Tristan. Yeah.
Who's Peyton DeSilva? Is that Louisville?
The one I actually keep on hearing about, ironically, is actually Max's brother Cam.
Mm-hmm.
That there's some potential intrigue there because this is a funny
likable player. But again, like he to me is like this. Like they should put one of those things outside the facility on draft day, like where it's like you must be like this tall to be taken at pick 17. Like
to be acquired. Like I joked the other day or like last week or whatever. I was like, the Lakers shouldn't acquire anybody who was shorter than 6'7" this year. Like you are good on guards. Let's go ahead and get a bunch of people.
And look, you should take the best player available, right? Like 17 is best player available range. Like you should just do that, I think, as a practice. But again, to your point earlier about development and getting guys like you putting people in positions to succeed. Like, I mean, think about all the stuff that had to go wrong for the Lakers to know they got something right with Austin Reeves.
Yeah.
Like a lot had to go wrong. They had to have a mid-level player, not be able to move with his knee. They had to have virtually every veteran min guy that they sign not produce, not work out at that position. Mm-hmm. Their season had to like really fall apart. And even still, as Austin will point out, like he played, fewer minutes than Kendrick Nunn and Matt Ryan at the start of year 2. Like in the opener. I mean, it is like it's a challenge to like really find those players and then empower them again alongside all roads point back to this alongside 40-year-old win now LeBron James, who like you can't like, especially with the way these teams are built now, you can't just give possessions away in development. Like it's really, really hard. And on top of that, Anthony, you're not practicing a lot. Like I don't think like I'm not surprised that I caught a bunch of shit early in the season because there was a lot of really positive Jackson Hayes buzz when they signed him about how he was going to pair with LeBron James and different things like that, and like how he was going to get unlocked and different stuff. And I think ultimately, like Jackson Hayes had a nice year. End of the day, like he got better.
He's probably going to opt out. Like he had a good enough year to opt out.
Yeah, I don't know what his future looks like with the Lakers, but I think he had a good season. He showed a real improvement. He was a guy who needs reps. Like reps on reps on reps. And if you're not going to get him in the game, which he wasn't, because they had a more win now player in Christian Wood who they wanted to integrate. They had lineups with small ball centers. They have Anthony Davis. Like there just wasn't a ton of opportunity. It was going to have to happen in practice. But again, when you have a 40-year-old guy and you have, a player in AD, you're not going to practice a lot. You're not going to have those kinds of practices. It is a real challenging time for the Lakers when it comes to player development in that way, as they sort of try to figure out what they're going to be moving forwards. It's a pretty good argument actually for like, if you can flip 17, which is really kind of a lottery ticket anyways, historically in draft picks, if you can flip it for a player of value, the name that would get everybody in a tizzy, a guy that the Lakers still love and would love to trade for, Alex Caruso. Like, I think it's going to take a little more than 17 probably to get Alex Caruso.
But two picks, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, I had heard last year they said no to 2 picks at the deadline, not from the Lakers necessarily, but like maybe some version of that. Or
it got to a point where like people that I was speaking to were like, no, they just don't want to trade Caruso. They'll quote unquote listen, but they just didn't want to trade.
They don't want to trade him. They know his value, right? Like, and like, I mean, is that like, but like that kind of a player, like, do you do something like that? Could you do 17 and matching money and end up with Malcolm Brogdon? Is like another name that I've heard a little bit. Like, those are the types of, I think, sort of interesting questions. I mean, like, free agency wise, it's rough out there. Some of the interesting guys, like, are guys that are coming off of injuries. They're guys that, like, before. I mean, like, you could talk yourself into Lonnie Walker as like an attractive minimum player on this team.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to, like, I would think Cleveland will match an Isaac Okoro offer sheet for the mid-level. I would think they would.
Yeah.
Is that a guy that you can really put them to the test on? I mean, I don't know anything about the Lakers' interest in this guy. A guy that I really like, Najee Marshall. What is that?
Denver?
From New Orleans? From New Orleans? Yeah, like Najee Marshall, like
I'm thinking just kind of Najee.
Yeah, kind of backup 3 who's just kind of stuck behind 3 really good small forwards in front of him, and Herb Jones and Brandon Ingram and Trey Murphy, and he's always played well. I see someone in the comment, Bruce Brown. Maybe if Toronto declines the option, I would assume Toronto will pick up the option and try to trade him. Would be my guess. But that's kind of what I'm thinking. But it's not like there isn't a. I was talking to a personnel guy from another team, and we were just kind of going through free agents, and like you end up talking yourself into guys like Chuma Okeke.
Yeah,
like it's bleak out there. It's just not a great class. The good news for the Lakers is they don't really have any meaningful pathways currently to pursue anybody in free agency.
Yeah, they basically just have their taxpayer mid-level, and I again think that that's probably going to Torian, but one guy who because I think Tobias Harris could be a free agent this year, right? I think he has a team option, and I think
he'll be a free agent.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to pick up his team option. And if you have Tobias Harris at like $30 million, he's really frustrating. If you have Tobias Harris on a mid-level exception, a lot less frustrating. So that's
I had a front office guy tell me that he thinks Tobias Harris is going to get more money than people expect.
Yeah, because it's a bad class, and that, part of that, like, again, like going back to the spectrum on D'Angelo Russell, I've had people say anything from he's opting in to he's opting out for less money on fewer years to D'Angelo Russell could get 3 years, $75 million from Orlando. Like it's that kind of a class. We do have
I was going to say one last thing too. One of their free agents this year, and like fans hate this, but like it is sort of true, is like Gabe Vincent. Like there is like, if he's on the roster, there is optimism that the things that they signed Gabe Vincent to do, he will be able to do, provided he's healthy. That he'll be in a better offensive rhythm. That he'll compete on defense the way that he competed on defense. I mean, look, he'll always be his size. Like that is what it is. But that he is like a toughness that has a toughness to him. Like, there's a lot. I've heard clamoring for like Chris Paul on a minimum deal and stuff like that. Like, if you have Gabe Vincent, like that position seemingly is like they have that now.
Yeah,
we'll see where they go from there. I'm not totally sure that Chris Paul wants to be on the Lakers either, for whatever it's worth. But like, it is it makes some sense. This seems to me like, Anthony, like a lot of like you're gonna hear Rob Pelinka on media day talk continuity again, and I think a lot of it is going to come out of necessity. I could be wrong. I like maybe there are, that maybe there's a Dorian Finney-Smith trade that makes sense for the Lakers to make. Maybe they call up the Wizards and figure out what the Kuzma ask is, or some version of that. Like these are things that could happen.
I've definitely heard that Kuz would be happy to be back in LA.
I would imagine
that's out there. Like you don't have to do much digging to find that out.
So like, I think like you look at stuff like that and say, okay, like, and I think, he would give the Lakers some wing size that they need. But like it is though, I will like for as much as I think we've seen, what Kyle Kuzma can do as a winning player, it's hard in this league to move backwards in a role. Like that's really, really hard to do. And this
that's
is a
my
guy
concern with Jeremy Grant. Like people are asking about Jeremy Grant, and he was Aaron Gordon before Aaron Gordon. And by the way, on the Aaron Gordon front, apparently his older brother Drew passed away in a car accident. So thoughts and support to Aaron Gordon. But Jeremy Grant was basically Aaron Gordon before Aaron Gordon. And then he wanted more on-ball responsibility, goes to Detroit, gets that on-ball responsibility, wasn't very good in it, and then went to Portland. And while they developed their guards, he has had that same kind of on-ball responsibility. Again, the team hasn't been very good, kind of sort of as a result of him having that on-ball responsibility.
Also, it turns out that's really fun for players, by the way. Like you can win it. Like people, I think, I did a podcast with a buddy of mine in Chicago, and we talked about DeMar DeRozan, and we talked about, winning and like, would DeMar DeRozan take a pay cut to go win somewhere? One, I think like there's no guarantees, by the way, that like as you move down the totem that you're going to be good at it.
Yeah.
I think actually like the chances are you probably won't be.
Yeah.
And then the second part of it is there's a lot of ways you can win in this league. You can win by winning titles, like, as either Dallas or Boston will here in a few weeks. Here's another way you can win. You can get a $200 million deal to be in Portland and shoot every time you touch the ball. Yeah. Like that's winning too. And Jeremy Grant has won. Like he is won. Despite playing for the Pistons, despite playing for the Trailblazers, that's it. Now look, I see a comment like that, you want to be in a winning role. Sure, everybody would rather win games than not. But I will tell you, look, there was discussion right about Kyle Kuzma in Dallas this year. Yeah. That was not a destination you wanted to go to.
Yeah. Well, like the funny thing about the funny thing about like the whole, does player X take less money or whatever, is that like these guys are hyper competitive in every other aspect of their lives. Their career earnings is something that they are also very competitive about. And then their role is also something that they are very competitive about. And then the type of player that most people think like, yeah, that player can just take less money and then take a lesser role on a team that wants to do winning or whatever. That player that you're talking about has been the best player that on every single basketball team that he has ever been on for upwards of, 30 something years or whatever. It's really difficult to go from that to like, all right, I hope LeBron passes the ball to me this time. It's a difficult transition for sure.
So the Aaron Gordon thing is like such an outlier, right? Because this was a player miscast as a primary offensive option in Orlando who became, a do-it-all sort of like brute defensively with some playmaking, and who did enough offensively and could play off the ball, right? Like he mattered off the ball, right? That's why he's special in that way, and as that kind of quote unquote third guy, even though he's really like a lot of times they're fourth in terms of shot attempts behind Michael Porter Jr., behind Jokic, behind Jamal Murray. I've had versions of this conversation with some of my friends that work in front offices all season about like, who is the Aaron Gordon that is hiding in plain sight? Is there one?
Lakers thought it was Rui.
And I think like ultimately like the Rui issue has been, on the defensive side of the ball, just consistency. Like he had a perfectly fine to good offensive season, high efficiency, made catch and shoot threes. It's just more, the inconsistencies rebounding, the inconsistency defensively. Guys that matter without the ball. Like that to me, if I could go into Rob Pelinka's office and write something on the whiteboard in all capital letters, it would be guys who matter without the ball. And so as they look, around, like you have to like that's what's so hard about this is there isn't just like an Aaron Gordon hiding in plain sight. I mean, one of the names you hear like comes with an absurd amount, and I hate to even use the word baggage because it's much more serious than this, is like Miles Bridges. And I just don't think that's a business, one, that the Lakers are going to be able to afford, two, that they want to be in.
Yeah, I've been told that the Lakers are not interested in him.
Yeah, you look at, it's hard right now because most of the good teams, like there's so many teams that are competing right now. There's 24 teams that seemingly are ready to like kind of go for it in some degree. So you start looking at the six that aren't, and if there's a player, I mean, like I'm a Denny Avdia guy. Mm-hmm. I think there's something there. I think it's really expensive to get him. I think, he's a young player on a good deal. Going to be hard to trade for, and you're going to have competition too. It's just like, can you talk yourself into Keldon Johnson? Is that kind of as a player who, if you take him and put him in a winning situation,
send you Keldon Johnson?
I mean, look, at the end of last season, he was coming off the bench for a team that had every reason in the world to want him on the court with, their future star, and he wasn't out there a lot. Mm-hmm. I think you could get him. I just like, is he better than Rui Hachimura? Like, are you sure, or are you just guessing at this point? And then with the Lakers having so few actual like assets to like they can't like, it's like Omar. It's like they're in Omar territory. Like if they're gonna come at like you can't miss. Like it's really hard. They've just somehow pulled themselves out of a big miss in the Westbrook deal. And I see Amber says like, I mean, the Mavericks traded everything that they had for PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford, and it worked out.
Yeah, sometimes you go all in and black comes up.
But like that was very much an all-in push for Dallas. Yeah. And I remember at the time talking to people about it, real questions about like, did they give up too much? Was it worth it? Obviously it's worth it.
It is now.
Like it worked out. PJ Washington, I think you can slide into not as good as Aaron Gordon, but like that kind of like really useful. Even Daniel Gafford, who has been fantastic. And it balanced the roster. It's just, look, it's a really hard time for this roster. I don't think there's a really clean answer out there. And it involves a lot of projection.
Yeah. All right. We do have a couple more super comments here. So we'll try to rush through those. It does mean I get to play this though. All right. So the first one here comes from Justin Tyndall, who writes, so we are going back-to-back rookie coaches to end LeBron's career, LOL. If we had a GM that has an eye for talent, this wouldn't be as big of an issue. This is what's kind of surprising to me, and I think part of this is dictated by the market, but I am kind of surprised that, it didn't work out so well, or it didn't end so well, because it's hard to say that it didn't work out when Darvin Ham helped you get to the Western Conference Finals. That isn't how the Lakers dictate success. They define success with titles. But still, it's hard to say that it didn't work out. It didn't end well, and he was pretty bad in the second season, I thought. But it's interesting that they're going to go from, usually the pendulum swings, right? Luke ended poorly, so they go with Frank Vogel. And then Frank Vogel ended poorly, so they go rookie head coach Darvin Ham. And I find it really interesting that they're probably going to go from rookie head coach Darvin Ham to even less experienced head coach in JJ Redick. Is there anything to glean from that? Do you, or do you think it's more kind of a
they tried to hire Hubie Brown, but they couldn't get him as the antithesis to Darvin Ham's experience.
Yeah.
I think, they view it probably as like fruit from a different tree. You know, like Darvin Ham is establishment in a way that like JJ Redick isn't, weirdly enough, in terms of like coaching pedigree. And I think there's that. I mean, I think there is, there has to be elements of like sort of a belief that this is something LeBron wants, even though I can emphatically say that like he is not even in the backseat on this.
Yeah.
Like this is like, I wrote a piece about this, I think in the newsletter, about kind of like how sometimes power can just be implied. And I think I think this is a very strong case of implications of like actual power versus like him saying, I do not believe that he has said like, I want this person hired. I don't believe that like even a bit.
Not a single person I've spoken to
totally
has
out
said
of it.
that.
Totally out of it. And that's sort of how he's moved on this stuff here recently. Like sort of the famous line you hear all the time is like, if they listen to LeBron, Ty Lue would be coach and Kyrie would be point guard. Like you hear versions of this, right? So I mean, I think if there was a more obvious, if Nick Nurse was available, I think they would try to hire Nick Nurse. Like, if Rick Carlisle wasn't coaching the Pacers, I think they'd try to hire Rick Carlisle.
If Doc was available, they'd probably go out and try to hire Doc.
So I think that's, it's just a byproduct of the pool. That's not to disparage Kenny Atkinson, who I think is a good coach, who I just think is a bad fit for where the Lakers are in terms of their sort of development period. That's not to disparage Terry Stotts or James Borrego or anyone, and look, by the way, like if we had done this podcast in 2019, talking about how it's definitely going to be Ty Lue, which we would have, it ended up going to the Borrego in that search. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the way the chips laid out, like Frank Vogel was the Borrego.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. Choice.
It was such a weird, that was,
and that's not to say Borrego's the fourth choice. I don't believe he's fourth, but like he is sort of, in that, and
he's not first.
And I don't believe he's first currently. No. Like, I think that is the, like, kind of part of, maybe it shakes that way, but it's a weird thing. It's just a really weird time.
Last one here, Justin Tyndall again writes, really wanted Gafford at the deadline to pair with AD, but Pelinka is clueless. His big offseason moves were Vincent and JHS. He signed a good role player in Caruso, was a two-way, and Vando via trade. I think that was just kind of building off of the previous post. Yeah, because I'm saying it was 4 minutes later. But yeah, the Pelinka thing is interesting, and I don't want to corner you here, but the question I keep asking myself is like, in how many other circumstances would a GM be on the verge of hiring their third coach in 5 years? It gets tricky there. And there's a lot of, like you say, baggage.
Sean Marks.
I guess that's true. But I think there should be questions about that guy too, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is like, again, like the weird part of this period of time, right? Is because you do, in this span, you have a championship and you have a Western Conference Finals appearance.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like to I think it'd be disingenuous to say like Rob Pelinka's done a terrible job these last 5 years. Like there's a ring, there's a conference championship, and who knows, maybe 30 years from now we'll say there's an in-season a conference championship appearance, and then there's an in-season tournament victory. Maybe that may end up being a thing someday. Who knows? We'll look back at this and say he authored a team. You just put Cabernet through your nose? But I think like the and look, and at times
I was talking to Harrison for a second. I was not prepared for that one.
And I would say too, to Rob Pelinka's credit, I might just like arguing that I'm going to like argue for Rob Pelinka for a minute. Has won some around the edges. For as bad as the 21 offseason was, signed Malik Monk.
Yeah.
Didn't keep him, but signed him.
Couldn't keep him. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what I mean? I think I
didn't think last offseason was that bad. I considered it a double at the beginning of at the coming off of the summer. I thought it was fine. I didn't think it was good.
The Westbrook trade is inexcusable. Hindsight will show it to be crippling. And look, they've really dug themselves out of it about as good as you can, all things considered, with limited assets, with limited ability to like totally undo it. It's been okay. Now, okay isn't good enough when you have LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and when you have the built-in advantages that the Lakers have. And I think that is like the fairest criticism of Rob Pelinka, is that like, has he done enough with everything that they have access to by being the Lakers?
Yeah.
And is one title in 5 years enough with LeBron James?
And
probably not the way he's played.
Yeah.
But look, they've had some bad injury luck. Some of it to be expected. Maybe they moved away from their 2020 core too quickly. Maybe that team deserved another crack at it. It's just like, it's so hard to say. I do think though that it is like these things. I think the one thing that I can only say for sure about Rob Pelinka, and like when you assess him as a general manager, is that they haven't hired coaches well. They haven't had the type of stability in that seat that you'd want. That when you look again at the teams that are, playing, like, and I understand what happened to Boston's a little strange, but like, that's like, that's an extension of like Brad Stevens, and like that was in Ime is instability, but Joe was an extension too of like the Brad Stevens, and Brad Stevens is still there. Yep. Jason Kidd has become a part of Dallas's culture in that way. Things feel more settled elsewhere. Whereas like there is always like this undercurrent of chaos with the Lakers that I think has helped lead to some of this. It's a good question.
Yeah. All that I was kind of hoping for this offseason was that the Lakers would hire a separate GM, right? Fill out your front office. It is the thinnest front office here in the NBA, where you have somebody who is the vice president of basketball operations. Might be president. I always forget. It's a difference without a distinction, but whether he's vice or president of basketball operations, and he's also the GM, I was hoping that they would maybe add to that, so that you could have somebody who's more focused on the minutia. Because essentially, when they hired Magic, the hope was that Magic would take care of the macro things and Rob would take care of the micro things. And that hasn't, it doesn't appear to play out that way. But I have taken up way too much of your time, Dan. I greatly appreciate you hopping on here.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
I really do hope that you guys do subscribe to the LA Times and the coverage that Dan and Brad and everybody over there does of the Lakers and LA sports in general. I also just really think local journalism is really important. So please do support that. And yeah, I can't wait to, if I don't talk to you before then, see you in Vegas.
Yes. I'll be around, and thanks for having me, and thanks to everybody, and congrats on all the success with this. It's always fun to be scrolling X at night. And it's funny, Anthony, like I try to really like unplug as much as possible. Like,
yeah,
I watch probably fewer basketball games than you would expect in the summer. Like it's just like, it's important unplug it. Like, yeah. And, can we address this quick? What Rondo comment did I make, Tina, that was engagement baiting? That they've discussed him as an assistant coach? They have discussed him.
Did I make it? Is it me?
Oh, I mean, look, that's he may say that he doesn't want to coach. No, Tina in the comments. I'm reading the live comments.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, everybody can be convinced. I will say there is like, I mean, I know with Rondo, like his daughter's like a very good volleyball player. He's involved with some of that. These are players that don't need to do this stuff. But I think like it is interesting, like with like someone like JJ, whether it's Rondo, whether there's nothing, my understanding at least, there's like nothing quite like being on a team at this level.
Yeah. That's why JJ's going back. It's
just like, yeah, the adrenaline, the push. It's like, you can't match that anywhere else.
Just imagine like your typical Wednesday night when you're playing in the NBA is playing in front of tens of thousands of people who are like living and dying on every single thing that you do on a basketball court. And you go from that to like being a dad. And I love being a dad. Don't get me wrong.
America's greatest joy.
but it's a tough shift. It really is. But yeah, Dan, I greatly appreciate it. Please do check it out. Do you have anything that you want to plug before we get you out here?
No, I mean, I'd say, just read the LA Times, support journalism wherever you can. If you live in a town that's not LA, subscribe to your local newspaper. If you live in LA and you care about the Lakers, subscribe to the LA Times. We'll try to make it worth your while.
All right, that is going to do it here for this episode of the Lakers Lounge. You guys can hear it in my voice. I don't think I'm going to try to stretch it with an extra show tomorrow, but I believe, as of right now, slated to hop on Jovan's show tomorrow. So if you guys want more of lounge adjacent content, you can check that out when it goes live as well. But yeah, follow Dan on Twitter, follow this show here, wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. And until the next time you guys hear from us, have a great rest of your day. Make somebody else's, and I will talk to you whenever I do.